Welcome to the show. Here's my dad.
On this episode of the Infant Adoption Guide podcast, we talk with Clay Steeves, an adoptee and a dad through adoption. Well, hey there. Welcome back to the Infant Adoption Guide podcast. My name's Tim Elder, a dad of 3 through infant adoption. This is where we talk about infant adoption because we want to give you the hope, the inspiration, the resources, the community to get going on your adventure to build your family through adoption. That's what you're thinking about 24/7. I know I've been in your shoes. And I thank you so much for joining me today because we have a really special episode. Love this guy. Clay Steeves is a awesome dude. He is just passionate and he's got a great voice and he just loves his family and just what a perspective. Being a guy, an adult adoptee, and then adopting a son when he has biological children, and then in the midst of that being reunified with his birth mom is just an incredible story. And you're going to hear about that story with Clay in a moment. But before we do that, I want to invite you to go to our Facebook group if you have not joined yet. It's an incredible group of support only for people that are wanting to adopt. No other part of the adoption triad is in there. Not that we don't want them to be, or not that we don't love them. We certainly do love the adoption triad, the birth families and the adoptees. But this group is specifically for you and me that are on the road to adopt and or have adopted already. And it's a support group. And I'm the admin for it. We take special care of you in there, and we want it to be a safe place for you. Go to infantadoptionguide.com, and at the top of the page, you'll see how to get into the Facebook group. And while you're there in the Facebook group, say hi, introduce yourself, and we'll say hi back. I'll be in there with you. And I'm working on an even better place, an even more special place to get even better, more personal community that you can get and help each other along the way. And I'm just teasing that out a little bit because I'm not ready to launch it yet. Not exactly sure what it's going to even be called. But it's a special group of people, specifically you, that can join and be part of a special community that's just smaller, more intimate, safe, personal space, and that we can learn about adoption together. We can grow together. We can support each other because adoption does not stop when the baby's placed with you. It starts. So we're going to get into the interview right now with Clay Steeves, an adult adoptee and a dad through adoption. Enjoy. All right, our guest on the show today is Clay Steeves, and he is a dad through adoption. And after emerging from his rebellious college season, he lived a typical life, expected by him and his family standards anyway. And at the age of 29, he was going through the motions and living life everyone supposedly desired. And by all worldly standards, he had it all with a successful marriage, 2 kids, a favorable job, produced financial success, when that's until life rattled him to his core, as he says, and sent him on a transformational journey to uncover who he really is and what he's uniquely created to do. And nearly 10 years later, now he's been married to his wife for over 15 years. They have 5 kiddos total, 4 biological and 1 adopted. And he is an advocate for adoption and reunification. He's the owner of an orthopedic device sales company, and he's also an author and the host of a podcast called Convos with Clay. And they prioritize family dinner around the table, financial giving, hosting others in their homes, serving the local church, all good stuff. Welcome to the show, Clay. How are you doing?
Man, I'm great. You just took me down memory lane right there. So it's like emotional and fantastic, all of the above at the same time.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a roller coaster there, right?
I was trying to keep up with it. Like, yes. Make sure. Yeah. All accurate. Yeah. Things I'm passionate about and my story, no doubt about it. Thanks for having me, Tim. Really, really excited to be here. Love the heart of your podcast. And yeah, I'm very, very passionate about adoption, restoration, reunification, all of it.
Yeah. And I can't wait to get into that because, we get a lot of folks asking us about, can we get an adoptee, an adult adoptee perspective? And you being a guy and an adoptee and a dad through adoption. I mean, we've got the perfect scenario here. The gray, well, maybe not perfect, the imperfect scenario, but you're the right guy. I'm so excited to have you on the show. And just talk about all this stuff because there's some great insights that I can't wait to dive into. And the first one really is just kind of tells the story. Like, and I know we could probably go the whole 40 minutes here about how you were adopted and what life was like and how you adopted your kid and what it was like. But that we'll get into the details of that. But it just kind of briefly go over your story, how you were adopted and what life was like for you as you grew up in your family.
Man, you want to have some fun. I'm just going to throw us a curveball. You can delete this if you want, Tim, but my phone goes on silent, do not disturb when we record podcasts. But I often leave it on so that I can search for notes or things if I need to, because it's quieter than a keyboard, right? My birth mother just called right now. So I just am adding a fun nugget. So I'm excited to be able to connect with her. I'll call her here in a little bit.
That's cool.
So that was just, it was a God little nugget right there.
Yes.
God was gracious right there in a moment. I can't remember being told that I was adopted. And that's actually something I greatly value from my parents, is that it was just always a part of my story. It was always a part of our family. And my mom always had this fun phrase, and she'd be like, honey, you came from my heart, not from my tummy. And that's the worst voice I could ever do for my mom. So sorry, Mom, I apologize for butchering because I'm losing my voice right now. But it really was just something that was embraced in our household, Tim. And I loved that fact because being an adoptee, and even as an adult, as I really try to process it better now, I would say better, maybe in a more healthy, more mature way now, adoption is a paradox. And I was reflecting on this just yesterday. My family and I drove home from Texas to Oklahoma, and we actually drove right by the street where I was placed for adoption. In Fort Worth, Texas. And so as I saw the street sign go by, I was just reflecting about it. And man, adoption's a paradox where there's relinquishment and being chosen at the same time. And I used to say this as a kid, is that I felt I wore it like a badge of honor, like, first day of kindergarten, first day of fifth grade, whatever it was, like tell something unique or cool about yourself. Yeah. I used to say that. And I was like, oh, I'm adopted. This is a badge of honor. But then I often felt like a black sheep in my own family. And so it's kind of this paradoxical experience. And all of that, I'm just trying to paint an accurate picture. And at the same time, then praise my parents because they made it normal. They just embraced me. They chose me. They didn't hide anything from me. They shared what they knew of the story. And I just always appreciated that. So that really is kind of the foundation that I grew up with from, I guess, from an adoptee perspective. And that was how my parents addressed it when I was a young boy.
Yeah. So you were adopted into a family that they had biological children already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. I had one biological big sister who was 6 years older than me.
Okay.
Correct statement. Okay. Yep.
And so you grew up in your family knowing you were always adopted. You wore it a badge of honor at times, and other times kind of felt like a black sheep. After you moved out to your family, your family home as you're growing up and you're out on your own again, did that ever come back up? Did those feelings come back up, or did you still feel like a black sheep?
With my story, you referenced it in the intro, my rebellious season. I think that was the phrase we used. Yeah. Really, it was in that season. I was pretty reckless with my approach, especially with my approach with life. And often when we make reckless decisions, those closest to us bear the brunt of the wake of destruction that a person can inflict on themselves, and again, those closest to them. And so I was pretty reckless with my words as a young adult, I should say, 18, 19, 20. And I really hurt my adoptive mom with kind of my approach. I probably used the scenario, I probably weaponized it in an unhealthy way. And she was full of grace and very patient, but it was very hard for her. And so really I'll say when I kind of got the veil off of my own eyes and when I softened my heart, just as a person, I didn't want to hurt those closest to me. And so I really kind of buried it to answer your question about, did I explore it more? Did I chase it? I really just kind of buried it, moved on. And it wasn't for years that my wife was probably more inquisitive as to, my biological history, to try to understand as we began to have biological kiddos, to understand potential health challenges or, family history, those kind of dynamics. She was probably more curious than I was. But that's again because I didn't want to hurt my family around me, as I had previously used that dynamic as maybe a wedge and a tension point between me and my adoptive parents.
Okay. So you get married and you start having biological children.
Yep.
At what point did you guys decide, you know what, adoption is for us? That's how we want to add to our family.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell this story, and I just want to clarify on the front end of it that our experience was just our experience that led to adoption. And so, we got pregnant with two biological kiddos pretty quick, first try, so to speak. Like, okay, we're going to get pregnant, and we got pregnant. And then a year and a half later, okay, we're going to try again, and we got pregnant again. And so we had two bio kids 2.5 years apart to the day, to be exact. And we were like, okay, we're going to have our next kiddo. And we got preggo, and my wife ended up having a miscarriage. And so, and the nuance I want to do there is that anybody who's listening that may have been battling infertility or challenges, it doesn't always mean that's a sign, but for us, that began to be a challenge for us. We couldn't get pregnant again. We kept feeling a tug to expand our family, and we couldn't buy, biological, the two of us, means. And so we began to, I'll probably say, have more open eyes and open hearts to other ways to expand our family. We began to, at our local church, there was a big fostering movement. And in the state of Oklahoma at that time, there was an organization called the 111 Project. It was essentially trying to engage the local church to help meet the crisis of kiddos and needs of families, because essentially if every church in our state at that time had been willing to take in one kid, we could have gotten every child out of shelters and out of tough situations and into a healthy home. And so, we wanted to be a part of that. We wanted to step into that. And so for us, that was actually how we got into kind of grafting families, was through fostering. And again, continuing to try to get pregnant through that season, but unable to, as we began to foster a little boy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So the boy that you were fostering and you ended up adopting, and he was your number 3.
Correct statement. Right. Yeah. So through the, and that wasn't our objective, but through circumstances, completely out of our control, his family ended up, his mom and dad, unable to reunify with him. And it's just a heartbreaking scenario. Yeah. And that's always, I think that's just a truth we always have to rest in. And we kind of, even like I talked at the top of the conversation about, I once heard somebody say that adoptive families are built on the grave of another family. And the first time I heard it, I was like, man, that is a harsh statement. It is harsh. I know. But then if we sit with it for a second, I think there's some veins of truth in it. And that doesn't mean beauty doesn't come from that. That doesn't mean family doesn't come from that. That doesn't. But I think there's some truth that if we can accept that truth, that allows us to build healthy families out of it. And so I think that's the part that was heartbreaking for us, was we were observing and watching all of that pain on the front side. And then as this little man, whose name means fire, by the way, man of fire, and he is that, I promise you, as he was in need of a permanent family. And for us, it was something we really felt called to and excited about. And I can't, weaving it all together, in this season, my biological mom started to reach back out to me. Well, she actually wrote a letter to my adoptive parents, and began to essentially say, thank you. I believe you're the parents of my of a baby boy that I placed for adoption many moons ago. And so I began kind of my reunification process, because she had reached out to my adoptive parents, all the while that we were fostering and then moving towards adoption with our son. And so it was a pretty unique season, upstream, downstream for me. Wow. And kind of the grafted family, looking at those dynamics, learning what that looks like, and how really family and love is a choice, right? It's just, you wake up every single day. It's not a feeling. And from my perspective, it's not even a biology. It's a choice. You wake up and you do it every single day. And so it really was a unique season for us, where both of those things were going on at the exact same time, literally at the exact same time. That's
crazy. And so you had you weren't searching for your biological family or anything. She came to you through your adoptive family, through your family, right? So you came to you.
You got it correct. And the full story, Tim, and faith and is a big deal to me. And so when I tell my story, it just kind of comes out.
Sure, absolutely.
I was actually at my church going through something called the Kazon process, and Kazon is the Hebrew word for vision or purpose. And the goal of that exercise and of that content is to help you discover your purpose, the vision for your life. And as I was going through the process, one of the things that they have you do is this exercise where you basically look at your past experiences and how they've shaped you. And there's the way they do it is they give you a window of time and you get Post-it notes of different colors and you write out different color Post-it notes, some for positive events, some for negative events. And I remember vividly that day, my negative events Post-its were like this magenta color. And for that rebellious season that we've kind of referenced a couple of times, I'm like writing events and lots of magenta is flying onto my personal experiences timeline. And in my own, and I'm going to use this loosely, but I'm also just going to call it what it is. Like I felt like a tug or an urge that was like, go back to school. And that's because I had actually failed out of college previously. In my rebellious season that we've referenced, I actually dropped out of college. And so now as a grown adult who is now fostering and who now has multiple kids and is now going through all this, I was feeling prompted to go back to college. And so I did. I was taking night classes, studying American literature while running our own business, all these kind of things. And as I graduated in December, that was the day actually that my birth mom wrote the letter to my parents.
Oh, wow.
So I just weave all that because the letter went to my parents and that was a very healing time, finishing school. And so my parents were very trusting, were quite remarkable in their faith to share that letter with me because they didn't have to. And
Right.
they chose, again, kind of like when I talked about as a kid, to just embrace it and say, hey, this is our son and he's got a different story than a lot. And so we're just going to continue to embrace that and love him and trust him to navigate it. And so they gave me that, which then allowed me to begin the process of reunifying with my biological mother.
Yeah. Did you sit on that letter for a while or did you try to figure out what do I do with this letter?
I put it in my nightstand and I said, no, thank you. No joke, Tim. I started laughing when you asked the question because if I could go back and get in my poor wife's mind, because I got that letter, I read it and it was so heavy.
Yeah.
Not anything she wrote was heavy, but just, I was 29 years old at that time. Correct. Yeah. And so it was so much, it was so unexpected. I had quote unquote buried that hatchet or, I had buried that season or that pursuit. And so, yeah, it was a lot. And I put it in the nightstand and I just moved on like nothing was happening. And it was almost just like a ticking clock in there for my wife, not for me. And just cool part of the story. Few weeks went by. I think it was probably three or 4 weeks. And my birth mom actually sent a second letter to my parents. And this time she enclosed a picture. And I'm actually looking across my office right now at the picture. And it was a picture of my 5 younger brothers whom I had never met. And so, yeah, remember I grew up in a household with one big sister and that was it. And so now all of a sudden, like in this instant, bam, I had 5 little brothers. And so it was a freeing thing for me. Yeah. Sorry, I smiled. So when the letter first came, you it's not just heavy. You ask a lot of why questions. At least I asked a lot of why questions. So if there's ever any adoptees listening who maybe, someone has reached out to them and maybe they can empathize with me. I begin to be like, well, why now? Why now? Why are you reaching out? Do you need money? Are you sick? And one of the legitimate thoughts I had was, does she need a kidney? And that's not a joke. That was a legitimate thought I had. And that was a part of why I was like, this is too much. I'm just going to put it in the nightstand. And when that picture came, I can vividly remember, which is just me. I don't know why, but I was like, oh, well, if she needs a kidney, there's 5 other guys who can give her one. I had this like vein of freedom now. I was like, it's not all on me. I don't have to feel that way. But it was just a uniquely freeing and exciting thing to understand her story a little bit more. And that just gave me some freedom to reach out to her. Yeah, to reach out to her and start the process.
Wow. So in her letter, I'm assuming she gave you a way to do that, right? A way to connect with her?
Through our adoption agency, there was a formal process. And so essentially, she let me know that she had done her half of the process because I was from a closed adoption, back in the early 80s. And she let me know I've done my steps on the formal process. If you desire to connect, do your steps, and then they will end up facilitating and making the connection. So that was how it went down after that.
So how long after you got the letter or letters did you actually get to meet with her?
First letter was December of 11. Yep, December of 11. Second letter was January of 12. We spoke on the phone in April of 2012 for the first time, and then we met in person in July of 2012 for the first time. Wow. So, I mean, it was from that first letter till we actually met. My wife and I flew to a neutral site, and we met her. And yeah, so it was within 6
what was that
months.
like?
It was incredible. It was, it was incredible. It was emotional.
Yeah.
I remember there's a theme for me that I was just exhausted. And I'm just learning big emotions cause me to be tired. And that's just part of awareness I've gained on myself. And so like, I even wanted to go to bed not long after meeting her, like early that night. I was just so exhausted, but it was rich. It was disorienting because, I began to get pieces of my story. I would ask a lot of questions about my father. Where did I come from? All these kind of things that had always just been a mystery to me. And so I began to get to unpack some of that and learn more and more of where I came from. And that very piece, learn some of my own story.
Yeah, I can just kind of picture that. And I think we probably all have seen some reunification videos that people take or something, where you just run up to each other and grab, big hugs and crying and just kind of hold each other for a while. And then eventually start to ask questions and just soak each other in a little bit. Is that the right picture?
Man, mine wasn't fully like that at the start.
Really?
It was more awkward.
Oh.
And I hope in sharing that I can give some freedom to maybe just because I completely understand what you're saying. And obviously I've seen those same videos, but it wasn't that for me. Like I met her, and even so then in October of that year, I went and met my biological brothers because they didn't know I existed. So she ended up telling them. Mm-hmm. And it was, I'll just be frank, it was more awkward because I was with these people that you had this immense connection with. Right. So obviously, I mean, I felt like emotional connection. I know this is my birth mom. I know these are my brothers, but you're a complete stranger. Like, I don't know anything about you. It's weird. And we're from different parts of the country. And so and even culturally, their family was very different. Like there was some very foundational roots that were the same, based in the church, followers of Jesus. But I mean, their family and my adopted family couldn't be farther apart in just, in many ways. And so it was actually awkward and tough. But I've always said this, and it's just one of our phrases that my birth mom and I have, that Priscilla and I have, is that like we talked about the elephants. And that's always my encouragement to people, is just like, you gotta be willing to lean into that because it's huge emotions, a lot of awkwardness, a lot of elephants, and you just got to keep pointing at them and talking about it. And to where now, and this is, 9 years later, like we have legitimate relationship. We spend holidays together. They're integrated. And I use the word grafted, they're just a part of our grafted family. And my kids hardly know a world without them and without their uncles, but that's just years of kind of like all other relationships, right? Like your marriage, close friendships, like you just got to put in work. You just got to choose it over and over again. So it was actually awkward for me. I'll say that. It was awkward and tough at the start.
Yeah, and you're probably right in that it could be freeing for somebody else listening to this going, you know what, I didn't have that epiphany moment, that beautiful embrace and all that stuff. And I think maybe Hollywood probably glorifies that a little bit. We probably see that in movies and other things as well. So it's really cool. It's refreshing to hear you just give that honest take on what happened for you. So it's really cool. So you mentioned faith that obviously played a huge part in your adoption journey. And it sounds like you've really found your faith and grasped it over the years. Can you talk about how your faith has played the part throughout your whole journey to where you are now? I know you don't want to talk about your faith, right? That's not big for you.
I don't. Yeah,
just kidding.
I don't know how to tell my story or to even talk about my life without it, because, we talk about that rebellious season. I know the, well, there's a parable that Jesus told about two debtors, right? One who was in debt 50 and one who's debt 500. And which one do you think understands the depth of forgiveness more, the one who owed 50 or the one who owed 500? And I'm like, well, I owed 5,000 in that parable. So for me, yeah, I mean, I've been in holes. I battled substance abuse, so I've heard all of those closest to me. I failed out of college. I was a college flunk out. And I have, from, a broken scenario of two teenage kids who got pregnant unexpectedly. And I have been blessed beyond recognition. I've been called and chosen for a lot of things that I'm thankful for. And so I think, what did faith play for me? I think in the journey of both being an adoptive father of a son who had tough beginnings, who was drug exposed in the womb, who battles some real challenges, like some mental health challenges, even at a young age that he didn't choose. And then even as an adult, grafting into my own biological family. And to add to the story too, I've reached out to my biological father and he's chosen not to have a relationship with me, even now as an adult. And I think the thing I would say is that faith's kind of given me a larger story to be able to continue to take steps that on earth maybe seem hard or don't make sense, or how do you do that? And it's just given me the grace and the courage to keep taking one step at a time. And, even before we started recording, I said to you, the word rich, because I was with my family, my adoptive family this past weekend. Like, it was hard. It was messy. We got some tough health challenges going on. But I used the word rich, and you were like, huh. And I would just say that's probably what my faith, that's probably what God has provided for me, is that context, that perspective of the blessings that I have in the midst of hard mess, challenge, which, by the way, that's what every family is, just secret. every family, whether biological, adoptive, that's whatever, right, has challenges, has mess, has brokenness. And I think the more we can lean into that and keep taking steps, and maybe it doesn't make sense. Like why reunify with my biological family when it doesn't make sense? Why reach out to my dad when he chooses to reject? So why should I forgive? Because that does hurt as an adult. Mm-hmm. I'll just share it. That hurts. Why open your home to another child that isn't of your flesh, but to choose every single day to love them as your own? And we've done that. We ended up bringing in a young lady who was 20 at the time, who had been, in a tough situation, and she lost her father when she was 13. So I'm essentially a father figure to her. And so, like, why choose family like that? In addition to having our bio kids, like, why choose it that way? And for me, it's because there's just calling higher in our life that I think we were all created for. And everyone's story is unique, but that's specifically for us why we've chosen to kind of take those steps into the hard. Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear it in your voice and in how you're telling your story, what it means to you and how much it's changed you and worked on you. And God's definitely been working in your life. Just in that little bit of a story you shared at the very beginning, and we're just jumping on this call to record this podcast, and your birth mom calls you. That's just absolutely God moments. Like you said, that's things that he's done over your life. I can tell in the little bit of time that I've known you. So I love what you're doing and how you're reaching out to people through your podcast. Let's talk about that. What led you to start your podcast, and what do you talk about on Combos with Clay?
Yeah, and I will talk about that, I promise. I wanted to share one quick thing on all of it, especially with taking in kiddos, again, as an adoptee and as an adoptive dad in my faith. I just want to connect one point real quick. It talks about the purest form of religion is taking care of widows and orphans. And yep. I will tell you, being an adoptive dad, it's one of the greatest challenges and hardest things for me. I know some people don't experience that as adoptive parents. We can express our challenge, and it's hard, and we have to choose it every single day. And being an adoptee who's been reunified with my bio family, it's hard. It's messy. It's weird. And that's the purest form. Like, that's the thing that actually is the purest form. If I'm going to, believe what the Bible says personally. And so those things that just kind of take us deeper and deeper. And so for anybody who maybe listening who professes faith or professes to be a Christian, let that sit with you for a minute. That choosing to do this and choosing to love someone and put them into your family, graft them in and choose them as your own. It'll be one of the weightiest things you do, because it's defined as, one of the purest forms of following God that there is. And so that just always daily challenges my paradigm of what it means. So It's been
Absolutely.
an earthly beauty there. So my podcast, Combos with Clay. Yeah, the thing we talk about there's since you got me going on my faith, I'm just gonna keep on going.
Oh no, you're
and
fine.
Come on now.
Absolutely. Keep it going.
In Luke, there's the verse in the King James translation that says the Son of Man came to seek and save what was lost. And for me, I believe I was created for a life. And by the way, I believe you are, Tim. I believe everybody listening is created for a very unique purpose. And I think a part of the fall, a part of what happens with man, with women, is that it's not just that we're fallen and separated from God and we need salvation, which we do. And my belief comes from Jesus Christ, and that alone through him. You can't earn it in any way, shape, or form. I also believe there's a life we were created for on earth, a life that we were given a calling for here in the dash from the day we're born till the day we die, that often is lost on Christians. And so I think there are a lot of Christians, in my opinion, walking through life with salvation, with eternity secure, but yet not fully alive to the life that was lost of theirs here on earth, the calling, that the brokenness and the fall puts on us. And so the podcast has started to have conversations with those that I believe have awakened, have been restored to the life, and they just share their stories. And we just talk about different areas that they have expertise on, their own personal journeys, because we want people to be alive. We want people to be fully awake, purposeful to the very unique thing they were created for. And I think telling stories and listening to the stories of others often will give us courage. I believe it will often catalyze us to take steps that don't make sense, because when we see others do it and we can connect with them in their weaknesses, in their pain, in their brokenness, and then yet see them taking those steps towards purpose, that often will give us the courage to do that on our own. So that's what we've done with the podcast. We started it earlier this year, and it's just a blast because I love talking. So my poor mom used to always say, honey, could you just use your inside voice just a little bit? So, and I haven't figured that out yet. So
I don't think you need to either.
Just do what?
I don't think you need to find your inside voice. I think you got a great voice. And I think you're supposed to be podcasting. That's for sure.
Well, I love doing it. I've really enjoyed it. And so that's the heart of the podcast.
And if you go to claysteves.com, you can easily see where all of his episodes are there. And a couple that stand out to me are one, Steve Largent. And if anybody knows football and NFL, that would be a pretty cool episode to listen to. And the other one is with your wife, episode 14, and then that's pretty cool to have your wife. I've had my wife on once or twice, and it is a blast. It's fun to just have them tell stories for a change and kind of work with each other on the podcast. How was that to have a podcast episode with your wife?
Man, it was awesome. No, it was incredible. It's so different, right? It was just so different. Right. And it just the other day, I was talking with somebody and they asked what my favorite episode was. And it was like, bam. Oh, the one I had to talk with Kirsten. Because I just think, we've walked the same journey together. We've been married almost 16 years now. And just to hear, just her grace and her wisdom and her patience that she's grown in and lived out over these years, just the power. I mean, she really is a powerful woman, and I really enjoyed listening to her share pieces of our story that I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So that was my favorite one. Easy.
Yeah, that is cool. That's fun. But before we wrap up, I want to make sure and give you a chance to talk to people. So most people listening to this are either wanting to adopt, they're thinking about adoption, and it's the Infant Adoption Guide podcast, right? So they're probably looking at adopting a baby, and a lot of people come to this podcast not knowing not a lot about adoption. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, adoption it doesn't end when that baby's placed with you. It begins. You talk about the journey that goes on, and there is a total journey, and lots of times it's a roller coaster journey that gets you to the point where that baby's placed with you. And like you said, it can be a mess, a blessed mess.
Yeah.
But that adoption really begins at placement. I mean, and you've talked about that in your journey, how your family raised you. You never were told that you were adopted because you always knew. And that's so cool, being adopted, especially in the 80s when maybe that didn't happen so much when I closed adoption. So in this world with open adoption and people having a lot more connections with their kids' birth families.
Yeah.
And you got people that are wanting to adopt, listening to you right now. What tips or stories or resources, what would you tell them about wanting to adopt?
Yeah. Well, the first phrase that came in my head, I just encourages you. One, I'd encourage you, pray with it, be aligned with your spouse, make that step together. If you're married, if you're solo and doing it, that's incredible as well. But be courageously authentic with your kiddo. If you make that choice, of course, there's wisdom in, I don't sit and talk to my 8-year-old every day about some of the brokenness that he comes from, right? You know what I mean? We don't talk about, because I wouldn't do that with any 8-year-old,
right?
But
Exactly.
I'm not hiding elements. Like he and I, have always talked, like he knows his birth parents' names and he asks us a lot of questions and we talk about it. And at this point, they're not in a healthy season where, we don't know where they are, but they're not in a healthy season previously where they could have had a relationship with him. But I am hopeful. I'm hopeful for restoration, that he will be able to know them. And I will share with him along the way every bit I can. And I just always appreciated my adoptive parents being willing to do that, and my biological family. And so I would just encourage that piece, is be courageously authentic with your kiddo, and even to the degree of what you struggle with. And I'd encourage any parent to be that way, by the way, with their kids. It's somewhere that I'm trying to grow in myself. Hey, son, I'm struggling with this in our dynamic, or I'm struggling with it. I'm sorry, I lost it here. And so I just think that goes so far in what is a hard situation. Because it's like, because we have biological kiddos and an adoptive son. And I don't treat them different because some are biological or some are adoptive, but I have to parent all of my kids differently because they're unique and individual in themselves, right? Like they just are. It's like, I just think of certain great coaches. If you think back, how they know that you have a team standards and you have values that you have to hold to, but you also have to know how to manage. You have to lead your team, your kiddos differently. And so be courageously authentic and understand you're going to have different conversations with an adoptive child. And that's a part of what makes the relationship rich and special, and can be their badge of honor, and let them connect with other kiddos. And then the other, if I could just give like a practical thing too, getting community with people who are going through the same thing or have gone through the same thing before you, just to be able to go, I am battling XYZ. And they can go, oh yeah, absolutely. I struggled for years with that. And it just almost gives you that like, oh, I'm not just weird or struggling this on my own. And, we've found a couple families like that, and we don't even connect with them. It's not like we connect every week or talk, but just to be able to have somebody that you can call once, or when you see them once a month, or you connect with them somewhere, and you can just look at each other and be like, oh, I know what you're going through. Mm-hmm. It's just that empathy to where it can give you a little piece of encouragement. So just, pursue those. Because as you said, that was one of our great challenges post-adoption, was we kind of felt in the desert on an island by ourselves. And we didn't have, a bunch of our close friends just hadn't gone through similar experiences. And so for us over the years to find some relationships that have similar experiences, that really helped us navigate some tough seasons and tough times.
That's so true. I'm so glad you said that, because community is so important. I think we lose sight of it, and maybe we get some of that as we're going through the adoption process, but then after the child's placed with you, you're like, I don't really need that many people around me anymore, but you really do, and we've been through 3 adoptions, and I've found, man, that's so important to have that. And if you can get, like you said, people that you can actually sit down and, eye to eye, knee to knee with, and just talk and really have that connection with, that you can't really get with anybody else, because they're experiencing the same things you are. That's so important. If you can't get that, though, go at least try to find a group online that you could try to connect with. And I know Facebook's groups are fine, and we have one, and it's great, but they're a little impersonal. It's, you kind of dive into the sea of thousands of people, and it's hard to get a real good personal connection with. So I'm working on that. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag a little bit here, but
come on now.
I'm working on that. I want to help people get better community in a smaller, more intimate, personal way. And we're working on that, and it's coming. So stay tuned. We'll we'll share more with you guys as we get that figured out. But so as we wrap up here, Clay, I want to have people be able to figure out how to connect with you. I already mentioned claysteves.com. Is that the best place?
That is, yeah. And then that's the best place online, and then the podcast platform at Combos with Clay. That's exactly right.
Awesome. Yeah, go check it out. You can get it on the website, but also I'm sure anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, yours is
Correct.
there. Just search for it.
Yeah. Can I tell you a cool nugget on
Yeah,
that name?
please.
To kind of tie it with this whole story. So recently we were doing a video shoot. It was actually a year ago, Father's Day. So I shouldn't say recently. It was a year ago with Brave Love, which is an adoption organization. If you know Brave Love, fantastic organization. Yeah. Okay. Well, so there's a Father's Day video that I did for them. And I was doing some research ahead of time. I was going through some of my old hospital records, no joke, because my birth mom had saved all these and given them to me. And this was before we had made the podcast, before we'd started it. And what I figured out, check this out, Tim, I learned this at 30, I would have been 38 at that time. In the first 13 days of my life, I had 4 names.
Wow.
I had 4 names, and I discovered that at 38 years old. And so when I chose the podcast of Combos with Clay, like the Clay was very intentional, because I was like, man, who are we? Who am I? And like understanding who we are, understanding where we came from. Like I was going through a season then of even like finding out that I had 4 names, and that'll rattle you, by the way. I don't know why. Maybe just me. I shouldn't say it'll rattle you. It rattled me as a grown man to be like, I had 4 names. Like, who am I? And so it really has been a journey for me of like knowing who I am, and Clay being molded by God, no matter the story that comes before it. That's been a big piece for me. So it's just a little insider tip. If you go listen to the podcast, that's why I named it that, not just because I want my name in there, but because for my story in the adoption realm and the reunification realm, that was a big piece of knowing who I am in the story, because we are given a name, and names matter. And that was a very molded by God name for me. Yeah.
There you go. Nice. Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah. Go listen to his podcast. I mean, just listening to your voice, you have just one of those voices that's just easy to listen to. So it's going to be easy to listen to all the episodes you got on there. But what are you working on now? What's the future look like for you?
Ooh, which direction to go here, Tim? I mean, you tease that groups thing, which I love. I love that you're doing that. You know, we work in orthopedics. I've got a few things there. The podcast I'm very passionate about, but really in the pandemic year in 2020, I wrote my first book, and it really is my birth mom and I's story. It's our 2 stories kind of grafted together, very similarly as our families have been. And so for me, it's putting the finishing touches on trying to button that down, clean that up, to then try to begin to get that published. So that for me in the near future, that's one of my big dreams that is coming into reality.
Wow.
Is we're finishing a full book, which is quite a thing if you've ever done before. Holy moly, to write a book. It is a journey, especially your own story. It can be quite emotional.
I bet. And you've got a lot to write about. So I can't wait to see that book. Let us know when you get that, because I will share it on the show and on the website. And yeah, make sure people get a hold of the book, because that sounds amazing. Just getting a little bit of your story here in the last 40 minutes is just kind of teased us all to want to know more and more details, which I'm sure you'll share in the book. Wow, what a unique way to write a book, though, with your birth mom. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, it's been fun, and it's been again, I'm just going to use the word again. It's been rich. I'm not going to overthink it. It's been very rich.
I like that.
Yeah.
Rich is good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. We'll have all these show notes of what we talked about, and your links in the show notes at infiniteadoptionguide.com. Man, I could talk to you for a long time. I'm so glad we had you on the show. You have such a unique perspective, and you have the heart of a man that is for your family and for God. And that's just, to me, that's what it's all about. So I'm very blessed to have you on the show.
Same here, Tim. Keep doing what you're doing, because kiddos like me, and then dads like me, are thankful for the efforts you're making, because it makes a difference in both of those people's lives. And so just keep doing what you're doing. I know I'm honored and thankful to come alongside you.
Very good. Thanks, Clay.
Absolutely.
All right. Amazing interview with Clay. Love this guy. He is just awesome. I could listen to him all day long. I hope you go check out his podcast, Convos with Clay, and it's over at claysteves.com, or you can go find it on Apple Podcasts, Google, anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Go check him out, listen to him. Great episodes that he's putting out there. And you can find all the links that we talked about in the show notes today at infantadoptionguide.com, and the podcast page. You'll see this episode with Clay Steves. Just invite you to go check it out and check all the resources that we got there at infantadoptionguide.com. There's a lot of stuff on there, a lot of great podcasts and articles, recent new articles that are just posted. So check those things out, and we got some freebies for you as well. If you sign up for our email list, which we do not spam anybody, we just give you awesome, really cool infant adoption information, and you can stay connected with me. So we can support each other through the adoption process. So go to infantadoptionguide.com and get started there. And we will talk to you next time on the show. And until then, I have you in my prayers as you go through your adoption adventure, your journey to build your family through infant adoption. God bless, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to my dad.